Welcome back to Allison Customs Project Car TV. Today I'm working on my Scout again, and yes, I've let Project Creep catch me again. As you just saw, I was cutting a hole through the interior quarter panel in the bed, essentially. I used this piece of metal as a pattern, and it's just a piece of 16 gauge that I cut out. It's 10 inches wide, 15 inches long, and then 1.125 radiuses on the corners. There's a lot of space in there that I was kind of like, it'd be kind of cool to be able to throw, I don't know, tie downs or shackles or something in there, for a winch or whatever. Just basically have a storage box. And the driver's side, of course, you've got the fuel filler there, and that's how you access it for taking bolts and all that out. So you can't really do it there, but we can do it on the passenger side. So as you saw, I cut the hole and then I flanged the edge of it. And my intent was I was going to weld make a box, essentially, two-sided, or sides and a back, and then weld that in. But then you're going to have problems if you ever need to get to the side marker light, if you need to run any wiring through there, or getting to the holes and the back of the Scout 2 badging. And I just decided, I probably ought to make it bolt in instead of weld in. Just so that if you had to get in there, because I've stretched the wheel wells so much, there's a whole lot less room in there anyway to get your arm up there. But also because if I put this box in there, now those areas are almost completely inaccessible. So what we're going to do is take this backing plate, and I've bent up 3 of these pieces of, I think this is 20 gauge, and it's pre-primed. And all I did was I made it 4 3/4 inches long, and the 3/4 inches so I could put a flange on it. And I don't really need a 3/4 inch flange, because I'm going to try and trim it down to where it fits inside the area where I did flange the sheet metal in the truck. The problem with that is it's really hard to get that even, so I don't know, we may leave this, but the biggest reason to go 3/4 inch is because if on a shrinker stretcher, you need enough area that it can actually grab it. And I need this to be the outside, so we're going to be stretching this flange so that we can go around these 1.125 corners. So that's my project for today, and we're going to start on, I made 3 of them. I might get away with just 2 or needing a little portion of one. But my goal is to make the box and make sure it fits in and out of there so I can do any trimming. So we're going to go ahead and get this box built and take dimensions for a lid and make some bolt holes and all that stuff so it bolts in and out really easy. And then we can, figure out the hinge, which I think is just going to be a piano hinge, and some kind of little latch that clips in at the top, so that it's, it doesn't need to lock really, although I guess it wouldn't hurt if it did. All right, well, I've got about half of it done, so it looks like it's probably just going to take 2 pieces. So the next one is we're going to go straight up, and we'll mark where we want to start and finish our curve, and then put that in the stretcher and bend that one around. So this corner came out really smooth. This one I had some troubles. This was the first one I did, and I stretched too much in one little area and it split it. So I ended up welding that one back together. But this side, I kind of figured out what I'd done and stretched a little earlier and a little later in the curve, trying not to get it all right here in this one spot. So we'll start this next one. It's just going to go in just like so. And actually, I've got to clean up this edge a little bit because it's kind of gotten out of square. So I'll set this back on it just a hair and mark it. Right there is where I want to start my curve. I'm going to transfer it all the way up to the flange. So what I learned was you need to start kind of out here with starting to stretch so that there's more material to make that whole curve, since it's such a tight corner. So we'll do that and come right back to you. Well, we've got this pretty well tacked together. I'm going to let it cool a little bit so that most of the metal is good, but over here where the seams are at, it's a little hot. So I'm going to let it cool down completely because it's still hot right in these areas. And then we'll come back, weld around the base, finish welding up these vertical seams, and then let it cool again probably and come back and do the final grinding of all those welds. But I think to get the idea, gives us a nice compartment. We can put a hinge right here on this with a door that'll fold out. I need to find me a piano hinge, so I'm going to do that while this is cooling off, and then we'll get this thing, get it checked for fitment into the hole there. Okay, so I've welded it all up and ground down the welds. Now I on the back I ground them flush, just in case you ever had to get your hand up in here, you wouldn't want to be scraping on anything. On the sides, rather than thinning it out and basically grinding away your whole weld, I just left it. I ground them down enough to not be, you know, something that you could trip over walking through the shop. But other than that, I just left them pretty rough, and it's going to get coated on the outside, coated on the inside. You're probably, once this gets installed, it's never going to be seen again. So it's just not that critical. Now on the seams in here, I was a little more careful and tried to grind them so that they look nice. The next thing I did is I went to try and test fit it, and of course I left this flange really wide, so I kind of took a measurement. We're going to trim this off all the way around, and then we'll try test fitting it again, which I think it'll fit that time. And then we'll kind of lay out. We're going to put some screws, probably 6 screws in it. And I'll most likely just use a button head, either stainless or black oxide, and put some nut zerts through the body. We'll go give this a test fit, and it might need some adjustment to stay inside the flange that we made in a few places, but I bet we're real close. Okay, so I fit this to the cab. Had to do a little more trimming on the hole in the cab to get it the right size, and take some of the flange off so that it would fit in the indentation that we've, you know, flanged in there, the flange we put in there. And then I've picked up a, I don't know, 4-foot long piano hinge. I got a painted one or powder coated, I don't know which, and we're going to use just a chunk of it. Its thing was I could buy a 4-foot long one for like $12.98, or I could buy a 12-inch long one for like $10.97 or something. So it was like $2 to buy 3 more feet. I don't know when I'll use it, but you never know. There's always projects going on. So, all right, I've kind of roughly marked this already, so we're going to chop this off and then just kind of finish fit it in here, and then we'll start figuring out where we're going to lay the hinge. Whether I think the hinge needs to go on the inside, and then our door can't be very long below this anyway, so we're just gonna have to kind of figure it out here. I think it's about the right length. So my thinking is it needs to go right here versus putting it out here. Now if I put it out here, it could fold a little better, because it's just going to be a door that folds down. I guess we could do it on the side, but then this side would open into the roll bar. Not really a problem. I hadn't really thought of it doing it this way. So that's what I'm thinking. Maybe that's the way we go, is we put it on the side. What I do is just notch out that lip and weld this in place of the lip so that everything stays flush in the truck. Kind of thinking that's my plan. All right, so let's mark this. Welded inside and the outside, or I welded both sides, however you want to count them. And the reason I did that on this piece is because I am going to want to grind this and make it smooth so that it looks like it's just part of this lip continued, and that by having that weld on the back side, there'll be a little bit more meat there for that curve. So not a big deal, but you know, something that sure will make it easier later. Hinge folds nice. We'll cut our door out, and it'll get welded to this side of the hinge, and then we'll probably put, like I said, 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll come in here and use a couple of these holes, 5, 6 bolts to hold it into the truck. So we're going to let that cool off, and then we'll come back to it a little bit. Okay, so I've run into a little dilemma. I need, on the body, on the sheet metal in the truck, I need to make a flange that's deep enough to relieve space for this hinge to be there, since it sticks out about a ½ inch past where my flanging tool will actually flange that metal. So I think I'm going to try and essentially build a tool with, I have a pair of old channel locks. So I have this pair of old channel locks that the bolt keeps breaking out of them, and they're just some cheap ones I got somewhere. And I think I'm just gonna drill this out, put a regular bolt in it, but then I think I'm gonna cut some, and this is, I think this is 1/8 inch, but I'm gonna weld a couple of plates on there that give me the flange, and I can make them deep because these jaws are so deep. That will let me flange in deeper than for the hinge. That's what I'm thinking. Give it a shot. All right, so I ended up using that piece of angle iron, which was anything thicker started looking like it would probably be too much. And I welded on about a 3/4 inch wide piece to the jaw itself on both jaws. And then I took another piece of the same material, and I welded it on a little bit long, but I'm gonna go ahead and cut that off to where it matches about half jaw to half jaw, so that it'll be a little less than half, so that there's room for the sheet metal between them. But that'll give me my step in there and give me a flat spot for the other side, so you don't have those serrated teeth digging into the metal. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this one off. That's why it's in here. And then we'll take that coating off there. And we're just kind of aiming for right about half the jaw. See if we can measure that out a little bit. Now we just got to make the other jaw have the opposing cut. You can see I left it basically the same thing. I can cut off a piece and throw that away. I got the jaws made and they're working. I tweaked them a little bit with a grinder until they were giving me a nice deal, but the handles were like this far apart, so you basically had to have two hands on it, and for moving basically 20 gauge sheet metal, it seemed like pretty excessive. So I cut a slot in here and a relief cut, and I was going to bend this back so that one hand could do more of the work. And I just left about 1/8 of an inch there, and as soon as I started bending it back, it broke. So no big deal. I just beveled both ends. We're going to weld it. I was going to weld it anyway, but we're going to weld it all back together now. Better. Just went out there and dunked them into some water so I wouldn't lose the handle. I think that's going to work much better, because you only need them about that far apart to get in there, and then you got to be able to squeeze them pretty tight. So let's go give them a shot. All right, so I tried taking the camera over to the Scout so I could show you what I was doing with, but you just can't see anything in there. So this is the flanging tool I was using on that hole that we cut, and it has 2 steps in there, and it only makes about a 1/16 of an inch, just enough for the sheet metal to lay on top of itself. So it only makes a step big enough for the sheet metal so that it can lay flush. And that's great if you're trying to join 2 pieces of sheet metal. You could come in here, one side or the other, drill or punch some holes, and then you could plug weld it up, or you could clean all the metal off, and then you could use a spot welder and spot weld that together, and you'd get a nice seam. So the problem I'm having is I've got that box that we've made, and I need my hinge to be sitting off about 1/2 inch further than I can get in there and put a lip, even though the depth is about right. But I do also need a little bit of room for the actual hinge portion, the part where the pin is at, so that the door isn't kicked out when it's closed. So my solution, of course, was to make a tool, and it's not the prettiest one, but you can see it's got jaws, and they're 3/4 of an inch wide, roughly, and I've got about 3/4 of an inch depth, which is about twice as much depth as what I'm getting here. Now what I need to do is I need to make that indentation about another 3/8 or so into the panel. So I put my box on there, I laid it out, and I just traced around the hinge, and so we ended up with something like this that we needed our flange at. And if I could put this in if I could take that panel completely off the truck, go put it in my bead roller, we could do that. But that's not an option. So we made this tool. Now we just come in here and we make sure our lower die is basically on our line, or we make sure the gap between the dies is on the line, and then I just started squeezing it. And at first the arms were so apart, you were kind of doing like this to get both arms on it. And now, it's still not like the easiest thing in the world, but you can't do it in one pass. That's the other thing, is you really got to kind of go through it 2 or 3 passes. But I'm basically working in that hole, and the pliers are on the outside. I'm trying to make that flange like this direction, so I'm working it from the outside. So it's, you know, it's easy to see what you're doing, and it's easy to get the pliers in there. Should have picked a much shorter piece of metal to show you this on. So because I put the pliers on there the wrong way, you can see I moved the step the wrong direction from what I was doing, but doesn't matter. You can see that they're working. It added this second step in there. But because the jaws are not perfectly parallel and everything, and they're not quite long enough to take the old flange out, what I ended up doing was just working it 2 or 3 times down through the piece of metal in the truck until I had a nice line and flange. And then what I'll go back do now is I'll go back and use a hammer and dolly, and I'll dolly out the old flange. It takes it part way out. It just doesn't take it out far enough to leave it alone. I have to do something. So we'll show you that in just a second. Let me finish getting this one. So it makes a nice bend, and then we can take, if you had it out of the truck, you just take it and whichever way you want to work it, probably this way. And it removes it. Now doing it on an anvil or the back of your vise, it's the same thing as what you're doing with a hand dolly. When you're hammering a dolly, you're doing the same process. It's just the anvil, the dolly is movable, and so, you know, just like you were moving your hammer. So either way, we get a flange that's much wider in place, and that'll relieve space for the hinge on our box. So I'm going to go take care of that part. Alright, so we have its position. I marked it on the side of the box, and then we can measure the depth here to the top and bottom of the tang, and we'll leave a little bit of room each side of that. And we can measure that down and put our mark there, and then we'll cut a slot. And we'll start out with a slot that ends where we want this thing to lock at 90 degrees. Obviously it's got to be a little longer than that for that to slide into it, so we'll kind of work our way into that, but just filing in there, and probably make our slot about the size of one of these files, so that we need to get one that's got a file on the end of it, but then we can get in there and just kind of file a slot. All right, here we go, guys. It's got a little bit of play right now in the door so that the seal can go in there. And I can always file it up a little bit more. I just put a little piece of plate over this hole that had, you know, was big enough for me to start working my way up. Probably just should have started a full, I don't know, 1/8 or 3/16 of an inch higher on the deal, but that covers it. And the only reason to do that is because this part is actually outside, kind of between the quarter panel and the interior quarter panel, so you wouldn't want to be getting, I don't know, the little bit of mud or whatever might get up in there. Other than that, the door goes on, it closes, it locks. I still need to weld this hinge. Right now it's just got 2 tacks on it. I should have mounted this box or built this box and cut the hole in the truck about, ideally, probably a whole inch higher than I did. I've trimmed it and I've taken out about 3/4 of an inch and the door clears. What I didn't realize is the sides of the Scout, and a square would have told me, but the sides of the Scout lean in at the top. The bottom is wider than the top. I don't know why they designed it that way, but I measured it. I was talking to some people online. Everybody is commenting about it at different times, and I didn't catch that. So when this box is sitting in the wall and you go to open the door, since it's leaning in, the door was hitting the floor. So where I had measured my hole and where I was going to put the door so that it kind of matched the gas filler door on the other side, it didn't work. I moved the door up on the box as far as I could and still be able to hide the lip. And so it's got a big lip at the top and a smaller lip at the bottom. I tried a few things, and finally I just cut the hole higher up so I could slide the box up, and then I can drill my holes and put in my bolts. But what I got to do is at the bottom I'm going to have to make a little filler piece that will fill in underneath the box, you know, whereas if I'd have just cut the hole an inch higher, none of this would have been a problem. So if you're doing this yourself, wherever your interior trim on your Scout, the top's interior trim comes down below the body side, go down only about an inch below that and start from the top and work your way down and do your box. This box is 15 inches by 10 inches. It's probably as big as you dare want to go. You know, you could cheat it another inch or so. But what you need to do is just start higher up on the body, on the interior body, so that your door, because of that leaning, so that the door when it opens will clear. So no big deal. That's what I got. I'm going to go ahead and lay out my bolt holes. And I welded up 2 of the hinge holes. So I'm going to use the top and bottom hinge hole on here and put one in the top and center, and I'm going to match holes on this other side. I'm going to get it bolted in, and then I'm going to figure out what I need for a filler down here at the bottom and just make that. And I'll have to, because I moved this up, I'm going to have to flange a little higher for the hinge. So we'll get that done while we're messing with all of this. So. Here you go, you get an idea of what we're after. The roll bar adds a little more trouble just because with it there, this door is never going to open more than this, but that's fine. We can drop the tailgate, open this, store stuff in here, close it up, lock it. It's all going to work real nice. So I need to adjust a couple of the bolt holes here, or screw holes here, and then I decided I think I'm going to try and dimple the sheet metal so that I can use I don't know what the screw is called, so I can use one of these screws that has that tapered back on it, so it'll kind of sit flush. Well, it should sit flush if I can get that dimpled far enough to take that. So, and then this is where I made my error because I just had the door too low. You can see when it's closed, there's a pretty good gap here, but by the time it opens, I can't even get my a single finger underneath it or anything. So it's because the wall of the truck leans in, and I mean, you can see it once you start looking, and I should have known the roll bar has those same bins in it. You know, they weren't 90 degrees, so I don't know. I wasn't thinking about it. So whenever if you decide to make one of these, make sure you come up here and get as close to this upper panel as you dare to give yourself room for that bottom. You're going to want probably at least 1.5 inches down here in reality. I don't think, you know, I think this is high enough, but I was trying to make it look kind of like where the other access panel was. And originally I was going to make the door to where it folded down and just laid on the bed, and that would work just fine. Might even work better, because then, like, if you have a roll bar, it wouldn't really matter, except that, like, this door is slightly behind there, so you have to come closer or shrink the whole thing down just a little bit in size. So anyway, now that I have some of this stuff marked, I know I got my measurements for the filler that I need to make down here. I can pull these screws back out and make a little patch panel. Alright, so here's what we got. I just made a piece out of 16 gauge sheet metal and filled in the hole at the bottom, put another flange on it, and I went ahead and put my next nut zert in. And these are all number 1024 nut zerts. And then, like I said, we're using the tapered head screw, and I went ahead and kind of flared out the hole. Just so you know, how I did the flare here is I just took a socket. This one happens to be a Tex or Torx, you know, type socket, but I'm using the back side where the 1/4 inch drive goes in, and it just happens that these screws fit in there really well, and have a little bit of room. They'll kind of just move around a little bit, which leaves room for the sheet metal. So I stuck this under the hole in the sheet metal, dropped the screw through it, which, you know, of course had it sitting up proud a little bit. And then with that in there, then I just hit it with a hammer a couple times, and it flared the hole a little bit. Didn't really, you know, now I was hitting it fairly hard to do it, so it bent the screw all to heck. But those are cheap, and that was my little die to manually do that. So the receiver side of this, like, is just that 1/4 inch drive. It doesn't have to be exact shape to what you want. It just needs enough room and close enough as far as diameter that it's gonna not just flare out and let the screw punch all the way through or something. And then you know, the die part, the part that's doing the forming, is the actual screw head, so you know they're gonna fit. So we're gonna test fit one more time. Alright, well that's it. Here's the lock and the foam that we're going to use to seal it up. Those are going to go in there. There is right now just a little bit of an air gap in the corners, so I may come back and add 4 more screws, or I could probably just drill like an 1/8 inch or a little smaller hole, and then use like a Tex screw even just to fill the corners, and do that after everything's done. But these are going to hold the weight. It's not going anywhere, and then the door will close up and seal nice. So we'll put that rubber seal on the inside on the sheet metal, then put the box in, then we'll do another one on the box itself to seal the door, so that if the top is off, we can be out running around. And I went ahead and picked one that had a lock, a key lock, rather than just a thumb screw or thumb lock, simply because I do plan to run this with the top off. Well, that's it for this portion of the project. Again, I let things kind of get away, but you know, that's how you make your own vehicle your own. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you came up with some ideas for yourself. You know, maybe you make something like this, or something. You could do something in the rest of the wheel wells, make it bigger. You could do this on a pickup. You could do this on your Scout. You could do it on, I mean, anything that's got that gap inside there, you could do this on. It's just, I'm taking advantage of this one little spot. And I think some of the new pickups and stuff have some compartments like this, and that's kind of where I was getting the ideas. But anyway, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you again next time on Allison Customs Project Car TV.